The big secret about angle problems on the ACT is that most of these questions come down to just knowing the definitions of different types of angles. So complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. That's a super important definition. If you see the words complementary angle and you don't know what that means, then you're most likely going to get the question wrong. Complementary means 90 degrees. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So together, the two angles form a straight line. Again, complementary means 90, supplementary means 180. So with supplementary angles, if one angle is 130 degrees, its supplement is 50 degrees because supplementary angles must add up to 180 degrees. Now let's talk about what happens when two lines cross. Vertical angles. This is a definition you definitely need to know for the ACT. When two straight lines cross, they make an X, and this creates four angles. And they come in two patterns that the ACT will test. The angles directly across from each other, the ones that share only the crossing point, are called vertical angles. So the angles across from each other are called vertical angles. And here's the rule you must know. Vertical angles are always equal to each other. That means the measure of these two angles will be the same always. Vertical angles have the same measure. Next to each other, the two angles that sit side by side and together open up along one of the straight lines form what's called a linear pair. Because a straight line is 180 degrees, a linear pair is also supplementary. So these two angles add to 180 degrees. They are supplementary and they might be called a linear pair. So the moment you see two lines crossing to form an X, you know everything about the angles involved as long as you are given at least one angle measure. So if you are given one angle of 70 degrees, then just using that information, you can figure out the measure of all of the other three angles formed when those two lines cross. One angle is 70 degrees. Its vertical angle pair will also be 70 degrees, and then the other two angles must each be 110 degrees. All right, now let's talk about parallel lines and a transversal. This creates 8 angles. So you have two parallel lines that never meet, that run in the exact same direction. They are parallel. And now they are cut across by a third line that has a fancy name called the transversal. It's just a fancy name for a line that crosses each parallel line. So you get 4 angles up top and 4 angles down below. So we have 8 total angles. And with only 8 angles, there are really just 2 different numbers on the whole page. So there are 8 angles, but there are only 2 angle measures that they all share, the big angle measure and the small angle measure. Those 2 angle measures are supplementary, and then every one of the 8 angles that is formed by parallel lines and the transversals will have one of those 2 angle measures. Corresponding angles sit in the same position at each crossing. So the top right angle at the upper line and the top right angle at the lower line. Corresponding angles also have the same angle measure. Just a fancy name for angles in the same position. Alternate interior angles are the ones tucked between the 2 parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal. They make a kind of Z shape. Alternate interior angles are equal. Co-interior angles, also called same-side interior angles, are between the parallel lines, but on the same side of the transversal. They make a C shape or a U shape. These are tricky, so co-interior angles are supplementary. They add to 180. They are not equal. You do not have to memorize every name if you just remember the shape logic. Angles that look like they are in matching corners are equal, and angles cozied up on the same side of the transversal between the lines are supplementary, because you can really break this down into two pairs of lines crossing each other with sets of vertical angles, and you just know that they are all the same. When in doubt, ask a simple question. Does this angle look like the other angle or not? Because if they look like they are the same, they probably are. They're probably vertical angles equal to each other. And if they are not, then they must be supplementary and add up to 180 degrees. Those are the only options. Now let's talk about the triangle angle sum, which just means that all the angles in a triangle must sum to 180 degrees. There are always 180 degrees in a triangle, no matter what it looks like. Now, it's pretty simple, but the ACT likes to test this in a kind of weird way by telling you that one angle has a measure of x, and a second angle has a measure of 2x, and the third angle has a measure of 3x. What is the value of x, for instance? Well, we know that the angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees, so we just say that x plus 2x plus 3x must equal 180 degrees. We get 6x equals 180, and x must equal 30. Let's quickly practice a transversal question. Lines M and N are parallel. A transversal cuts line M, forming a 50-degree angle, and then continues down to a point P where it forms a triangle with line N. One of the triangle's angles sitting on line N measures 65 degrees. What is the measure of the angle at vertex P? Choices are A, 50 degrees, B, 65 degrees, C, 115 degrees, and D, 130 degrees. Pause the video and see if you can solve this problem on your own before my explanation. All right, now let's solve it. Step one is to use the parallel lines, the 50-degree angle up at line M and the angle inside the triangle down at line N are alternate interior angles, that Z shape between the two parallel lines. So this means they are equal, so that 50 degrees copies straight down into the triangle. Now, inside the triangle, we know two angles. One is 50 and the other one is the given 65 degrees. So step two is to close the triangle. The three angles of any triangle add to 180. So we have 50 plus 65 gives us 115. 180 minus 115 is going to be 65 degrees, which is answer choice B. Quick review, complementary means 90 degrees. Supplementary means 180 degrees. Parallel lines plus a transversal makes only two numbers. Vertical angles are equal. Linear pairs are supplementary. The three angles of any triangle add up to 180. And hard problems on angles will always be a combination of multiple concepts. So be sure to nail the simple basics so that when you have to combine them, you don't make any mistakes.